There was a time when car trouble mostly meant something mechanical. Now it increasingly means software, sensors, calibration, and a bill that feels smarter than you wanted it to be. That is the new reality. Your car is becoming a computer you cannot easily afford to fix. And no, this is not just old people complaining that cars used to be simpler. Cars really are becoming more electronic, more software-dependent, and more tightly controlled by the systems wrapped around them. NHTSA says advanced driver assistance technologies rely on cameras, radars, sensors, and software to help drivers and improve safety. That means modern vehicles are carrying much more digital complexity than older ones. And that safety side matters. These technologies are not fake progress. Some of them really do save lives. So this is not a technology bad rant. The problem is what happens when a normal consumer has to repair all that technology after the glossy marketing is gone. The sales pitch is smooth, the repair reality is not. That is where the money system angle kicks in. Because once the car becomes more like a computer, repair stops being just a wrench story. It becomes an access story, a software story, and often a pricing power story too. Who has the tools? Who has the data? Who has the software? Who is allowed to do the fix? And most importantly, who pays when all of that complexity lands on an ordinary household budget? This matters because transportation is already one of the biggest expenses in American life. Federal transportation data shows U.S. households spent an average of $13,318 on transportation in 2024. That is why even one bad repair experience matters so much. So when car repair becomes more expensive and more controlled, it is not a niche headache. It hits a major part of household life. And repair costs really have been rising. Bureau of Labor Statistics data showed motor vehicle maintenance and repair prices were up more than 5% year over year in early 2026, which matters when budgets are already stretched. That increase is not all about software, of course, but software-heavy cars are part of the direction, because the modern vehicle is no longer just metal, rubber, and moving parts. It is code on wheels, with hardware and software constantly talking to each other. You're not just driving a machine, you're driving cameras, modules, chips, and decision systems, and when those systems break, even a small repair can become a chain reaction. The old repair story was often simple: find the bad part, replace the bad part. The new repair story is more like diagnose the software, replace a component, update a module, recalibrate a sensor, and hope nothing else throws an error. That extra complexity means more specialized labor, more specialized tools, and more chances for ordinary owners to get priced out. Complexity is not neutral once it hits the invoice. This is why a minor bump that once meant bodywork can now become a sensor event. Small damage can trigger a much larger repair conversation. A modern bumper may not just be a bumper. It may be holding radars, parking sensors, or other expensive systems. And, after replacement, those systems often need calibration so the car knows how to see the world correctly again. You can see this in NHTSA technical bulletins all over the place. After certain repairs or software updates, calibration must be performed. That may sound like a boring procedural detail. It is actually a money detail, because calibration takes equipment, space, training, and time, and all of that gets passed on to the owner. This is where the phrase, computer you cannot afford to fix, stops sounding dramatic. For a lot of households, it starts sounding uncomfortably literal. It is not just about one huge catastrophic breakdown. It is about normal repair becoming more layered, more gated, and more expensive. There is another piece of this: repair access. The FTC's Nixing the Fix report said repair restrictions can increase repair costs and reduce consumer choice. In plain English, less repair freedom usually means more expensive ownership. The FTC also noted that when manufacturers restrict repair, consumers can face higher prices, longer wait times, and fewer options. That is not some fringe internet complaint. That is the Federal Trade Commission spelling out the logic. If more of the repair process is controlled through proprietary tools, software, and permissions, then the repair market becomes less open. And when the repair market becomes less open, the owner becomes more captive. Captive customers almost never get cheaper outcomes. This is the same hidden hierarchy you see in other parts of the economy: Control after the sale often matters just as much as price at the sale. People think they own the product. But in practice, the ecosystem around the product still owns a lot of the control. That is especially true when the product keeps needing software, diagnostics, and official approval to function properly. So the car starts looking less like a fully owned object and more like a controlled platform. You paid for the machine, but you do not fully control the system around it. And platform logic changes everything. The owner still appears to be in charge, but the ecosystem quietly keeps more leverage. Think about phones. Think about software. Think about subscriptions. Platforms are powerful because access can be controlled after the sale. Cars are not identical to phones, obviously, but the direction feels familiar. Features can be software mediated. Repairs can be software mediated. Diagnostics can be software mediated. The owner is still paying, but the owner is not always fully in charge. And that creates a new kind of household risk. A breakdown used to be mostly a reliability problem. Now it can also be a permissions problem, a data problem, or a calibration problem, which makes ordinary ownership feel more fragile. Even independent repair shops can be squeezed if access to tools, parts, or software is restricted. When that happens, consumers lose a layer of competition that used to help hold prices down. And when competition weakens, repair starts to feel more like a toll booth than a service market. This is why right to repair is not just a nerd policy issue. It is a cost of living issue with real household consequences. It affects how long people can keep a vehicle, how expensive a minor accident becomes, and how vulnerable lower-income drivers are to repair shocks. That vulnerability matters because cars are not luxury side quests for many households. They are work access. They are childcare logistics. They are daily survival, especially in car-dependent places. So when repair becomes more expensive or more locked down, the damage spreads beyond the garage. It can affect job attendance, school pickup, healthcare appointments, and income stability. Mobility problems spread into every other part of life very fast. This is where the class divide shows up hard. Wealthier households hate repair bills too, but they usually have more ways to absorb them. They may have a second car, more savings, better insurance, or more room to wait for the correct repair. A fragile household may have none of that. For them, one expensive computerized repair can become a transportation crisis, and a transportation crisis rarely stays just transportation for long. And transportation crises quickly become employment crises. This is what people miss when they treat vehicle repair as a hobbyist topic. No, this is about whether essential mobility is becoming harder to maintain for ordinary people. There is also a darker irony here. The smarter the machine sounds in the ad, the less human the repair process can feel later. The same technology that makes cars feel smarter can make owners feel dumber in the repair process. Not because owners got worse, but because the system became less transparent. The hood can open, but understanding does not necessarily open with it. That matters psychologically too. A person who cannot understand what broke, why it costs so much, or whether the quote is fair, feels less like an owner and more like a hostage. Confusion is part of the cost. And hostage-style ownership is bad ownership. Again, to be fair, not every advanced system is a scam. Some complexity is the price of real safety and efficiency gains, and that part should be acknowledged honestly. The honest position is not go back to 1995. The honest position is that if cars become more digital, the repair ecosystem has to stay livable for normal people too. Progress that ordinary households cannot maintain starts looking less like progress. Technology without repairability becomes a luxury trap. And luxury traps are rarely marketed honestly. They are marketed as convenience, progress, and premium design. Nobody leads with a calibration invoice in the commercial. Only later do people discover the maintenance lifestyle that came with the machine. This is similar to what happened in other parts of consumer life. A product looks like freedom at the front end and dependency at the back end. And once the household is locked in, the pricing power shifts. That is when ownership starts feeling thinner than the brochure promised. That is why the smarter question is no longer just, can I buy this car? It is, can I afford this repair ecosystem if something goes wrong? That is a much less glamorous question, but it is often the smarter one. That means thinking about insurance, repair access, parts pricing, local shop options, and how dependent the vehicle is on proprietary systems. The sticker price is only the front door. It also means being careful about mistaking advanced features for free value. A feature can be useful and still create future repair risk. In some cases, simpler may actually be cheaper over the life of the vehicle. That is not always true, but it is true often enough to matter. So what should consumers actually do? The answer is not panic, but it also is not blind trust. First, research repair reputation, not just purchase price. A cheap sticker price can hide an expensive service life. A car can be a decent deal up front and a terrible deal in the service lane. Second, get insurance quotes and ask basic repair questions before buying, especially for vehicles loaded with advanced systems. Third, support competition where you can. Independent shops and repair choice matter because choice helps discipline prices and keeps the ecosystem less captive. Fourth, keep a repair buffer if possible. Software-heavy ownership is not a reason for shame, but it is a reason for margin because surprise costs are more likely to sting. Fifth, do not buy features just because they sound futuristic. Buy features you are likely to value enough to maintain. That one rule alone can save people from expensive ego tech. Sixth, pay attention to the right to repair conversation because it is about your future costs, not just abstract policy. These rules decide who can fix what, with which tools, and at what price. Most people ignore policy until it shows up as a bill. This is one of those policies that really does show up as a bill. The bigger lesson is simple. A product can become more advanced without becoming more consumer-friendly. Ownership means less when the product becomes harder to understand, harder to access, and harder to fix outside controlled channels. And that is exactly the direction many complex modern products drift toward. Cars are just one of the most expensive examples. So yes, your car is becoming a computer. That part is real. The important question is whether it is becoming a computer that still serves you or one that keeps billing you for the privilege of depending on it. That is the real ownership test. If repair stays open, understandable, and competitive, technology can remain a tool. If repair becomes closed, opaque, and overpriced, technology becomes another class filter. That is the warning hidden inside the convenience story. A smarter car is not automatically a cheaper life. Sometimes it is just a more expensive dependency with better marketing. And if ordinary households cannot realistically afford to fix the machines they depend on, that is not just a repair problem. It is a social one. That is why your car is becoming a computer you cannot afford to fix. Once you see the full system behind the repair bill, the problem stops looking technical and starts looking structural, economic, and deeply practical.